Thorg Thung, Earthlets everywhere. Thank you for tuning in. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast, and on this episode, we're talking to Judge Dredd artist Dan Cornwell about going from driving buses to drawing dread. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the 2000 AD Thrillcast again, Earthlets. I'm your host, as always, Molch-R. And on this episode, we're chatting away to Dan Cornwell, who's one of the more recent artists on Judge Dredd, working with John Wagner on stories like Warbuds and The Citadel. Also the artist on Spectre, taking over from Carlos Ezquerra, who sadly died in 2018. Fantastic little chat about his career, pitching to 2000 AD as an artist in the 1990s, deciding to chuck it in and then coming back to it and getting an incredible break by, well, an email from John Wagner, which is a hell of a thing to receive. And they've worked together on Rock of the Reds, which is John's self-published creator-owned series, mixing sci-fi and sport. And Dan then graduated to working for 2000 AD. So it was wonderful, as always, to be able to chat to him about his career. Working with John, working on Dredd, and what he sees his future being in the industry, and a bit of craft along the way, which is really fascinating stuff. So thank you to him for that. I hope you enjoy it. In the meantime, please do make sure that you are signed up to the 2000 AD Thrill Mail at 2000ad.com/newsletter. Almost forgot it just then. And you get 450 pages of free digital comics for signing up. And also you get a weekly update on what's coming from the House of Tharg. Always a packed newsletter every week. Plus competitions, things like that, you know, all the good stuff. So yeah, make sure you go along to there. And do not forget that there is tons of new merchandise on the Rebellion web shop every month with new releases of t-shirts, hoodies, patches, glasses and mugs, and plenty more to come in the future. So make sure you get along there and you know, wear your fandom on your sleeve. So without much further ado, we're going to talk to Dan Cornwell about his time working on Judge Dredd, Rock of the Reds, Spectre, and what it's like to get an email from John Wagner. But the reason I wanted to get you on was to talk about primarily talk about Spectre, which is the series you've been drawing with, written by John Wagner, because very pleased to announce that that's going to be collected in April of 2025. So very exciting. And I wanted to kind of dive into it because it's such an interesting project. It's uniquely John, but also there's a slight bittersweet note to the whole thing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came to be on the project in the first place?
It came out of the blue, to be honest. John, I had just finished. Well, I'd just done The Citadel with John, and he messaged me telling me how happy he was with that, how that turned out. And then I did Nightshade, which is obviously one of John's stories from back in the day. And it hasn't been touched since what, the 80s, 70s, 80s?
The HMS Nightshade.
For the battle action comic. And again, he messaged me saying how happy he was, how that turned out. And then he said that, you know, would I like to take over Carlos and finish Spectre, that Carlos unfortunately never got to finish. John wanted it finished, understandably. I'm not sure. I don't know if I convinced him of that because of my artwork, or he had plans to finish it. but yeah, he asked, would you be happy to do it? Would you want to do it? And would you be, would you, would you not mind taking over Carlos? Because it's always a thing, isn't it? It's always that. I don't want people to think that I'm replacing Carlos in any way, shape, or form, because I've done quite a bit with John in the last few years, well, last 10 years. So I did think about it for about 5 minutes and said, of course, I'd love to do it. There was the only stipulation he had was that he wanted me to do the panel borders in the same way Carlos had. And those jagged, dotted kind of, like he used to do the outline of figures.
Yeah.
Just typical Carlos style, that. And so I tried it on, I think, 1 or 2 pages, and my style and Carlos's style is so totally different. And when I tried it on 1 or 2 pages, it just wasn't working. It was such a it didn't fit my artwork in the slightest. So I sent John an email basically saying, this isn't working like this. I goes, do you mind? I goes, you don't want a cheap imitation of Carlos. I personally think it would be better if I did it in my style, 100%, rather than, like I say, a cheap copy of Carlos. And he agreed. I don't know whether it's reluctantly agreed, but he agreed. And I think it worked out better for that. It just wouldn't have worked, I think, if I was trying to imitate. Even if it's just the panel borders, I don't think it would have worked. Because my style, and I saw someone not complaining about my style, but they were making a point or comment about my style, saying it's, and again, was it about Spectre? I think it might have been. And they said they prefer Carlos because, was it Spectre or was it? I can't remember. Anyway, whatever it was. Carlos is a much looser style than mine, which is exactly why I said with the panel boards, as they weren't working. So I went to my style, and like I say, thankfully it worked. Well, I think it worked.
Well, it's something we've touched on with the podcast before, which is that Carlos is just impossible to imitate.
Yeah.
Like if you consider the influence of Bolland, of McMahon, you'd think everybody would be trying to draw like Carlos, but then when you actually try, like even like Chris Weston and Jock and people like that have said, you can try all you like, but there's just something so unique about his style that seemed to flow from his personality that it makes it impossible.
Yeah, well, I think McMahon obviously did it in the early days for the first few issues of Dredd, maybe first episodes of Dredd. He had to imitate Carlos, but even then, Carlos's style progressed in itself. And I think you look at someone like Henry Flint. I think Henry Flint's got he's almost like a natural successor to Carlos, isn't he? In his style. But there isn't many imitations of him out there at all. Like you say, Mick McMahon, dozens. Brian Bolland, dozens. He can't. I think it's because it's so hard to do. Because, like they said, this guy here, like I say, he wasn't complaining about my art. He's just commenting on my art compared to Carlos's. He said Carlos's is a much more loose style, and that's like you say, that comes from within. That's not something you learn. That comes from within. That's how he drew. I've got one of where are we? Just behind my head there. There's he did a rock sketch, and it's just Carlos. You can see every line is Carlos.
Yeah,
it's just perfect. But yeah, not many people imitate him. It is a strange one, considering the influence he had on comics, British comics.
Precisely. I think it's along with, I think probably Steve Dillon. And Ron Smith, but Ron Smith is more obvious because Ron Smith's more of kind of an old school style. But Carlos and Steve Dillon, like you'd think they would have legions of imitators, and you kind of can't because it's just, as we say, it's an expression of them.
I do sometimes not riff, but I do sometimes go through Steve Dillon's work a lot, because I always thought he had a great sense of spotting blacks. You know, the black and white balance on a page. He's very good at that.
Yeah.
You know, you go through. Oh, he's very good at everything else, but particularly he's very good at his black and white balance and you know, the spotting blacks and making things pop on a page. So I always go through his. Yeah, but like as you say, his isn't imitated quite as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say him and Carlos. It is a strange one.
What are your primary influences?
There's so many, honestly. There's so many. It's whichever book I pick out from the shelf, basically. Like, oh, I wish I could draw like them. When I first started, it was originally I wanted to be. It was the 90s. It was the early 90s or the late 80s. But Bisley, I wanted to be like Bisley. And I soon realised I can't paint. Well, I couldn't then. So I gave that up. But then Carlos, I like Carlos's work, but like you say, it's hard to imitate. You know, you can copy him, you can trace him. But then as the 90s kind of went on, and I was starting to grow up, I was getting into my mid to late teens. Certain artists came about, like Jim Murray came about. Jim Murray, Trevor Hairsine, people like that. But they were, you know, look at Hairsine's work, Trevor's work, which very much Mick McMahon. So I think it all goes. I think everyone ends up going back to like the core bunch from the original. You know, Bolland, McMahon, Carlos, Dillon. They all go back to them, you know, in some way or form. And especially as I've grown up now, going through the older, you know, style or artists, they're the best. I'm sorry, but they are. You know, they did it all first, and they did it all the best. So yeah, now if I'm looking for reference, you know, Cam Kennedy. You know, Cam's work is phenomenal, and I remember I did again. I put it on Facebook, and because I was looking at some of his work on Clash of the Gods, and I said, was Cam influenced by Mick, or was Mick influenced by Cam? Because it's all around about the same time, and you can see a certain influences, especially some panels in it. You wouldn't know if it was Mick or Cam. And I think someone said, "Oh no, they were all influenced by someone else, a French artist."
Yeah.
But yeah, I think now it's those core, like I say, McMahon, Carlos. Although I don't imitate Carlos, I am influenced by him. Steve Dillon, Cam, the originals, really. But like I say, the new guys I loved as well. Like I say, like I remember I see us when not Jason Bressel, Jim Murray did. Oh God, what was that first fully painted series he did with the space judges? Have you?
Oh, the Apocalypse.
Yeah. I remember seeing it because I wanted to be a painting artist. I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Holocaust Squad.
A Holocaust. There we go.
And I remember when that came out in the Meg, and I don't know, because I know you draw yourself, and when you see something that where in your head goes, that's exactly how I want to draw. Yeah. I remember seeing that and being blown away and thinking, that's if I was going to paint, that's exactly how I would paint.
Yeah.
And that it just annoyed me. But
12, of course, Holocaust 12. Jim Murray and John Smith. Why did that name not stick in my head? But yeah, I guess also if you're, like you say, you can be influenced by what you've just read. You know, you pick it up and you flick through it. And do you think sometimes there's a risk of that kind of bleed of things into your own style? I mean, and I see lots of artists who not necessarily, you know, people who've been in the profession for years, but certainly who are beginning their careers. It can be sometimes a crutch. It can be, you know, I need to be inspired by this, or to you know, think about how this is structured in order to do this. When did you kind of begin to develop what you considered or consider to be your own style?
I think it's still developing. I don't think I've got there yet, to be honest. I know through the work I've done that whenever I've gone down the route of trying to imitate or be strongly influenced by any artist, I've never enjoyed my work as much. And I think it works better for me if I'm not, like I say, it's so hard not to be, like I say, you pick up a book, whatever book that might be, if I'm doing something on the, a war story, and I pick up, like I say, battle action or something like that, and there's, like I say, Cam in there, and I see Cam, and then it's hard to like deprogram your brain from what you've just been looking at, and then just transplanting it into your own page and your own work. It's so hard to not do that. So I try to avoid, at the beginning of a story, whatever story there might be, however many episodes, I will look at reference. But once I start the pages and I'm getting into the flow, I try not to, because like I say, I don't want to be influenced by it, because I work better when it's just my style, rather than, and it makes you depressed that you see these, how good they are. Like I say, the modern artists, I've got a wealth of reference from Google to start with, and your phone and figures and God knows what. Whereas the guys back then, they had to go to the library or go out with a camera or things like that. So that's why they were so good. And it's like I say, it's hard not to be influenced, but I try my best. I've been told my artwork looks like such and such, and it's generally the main 5 or 6 artists from the beginning, from the early days. And he looks like Brian Bolland, or that panel looks like such and such, and that. So there is influence there, but if you go down that as you don't want to become a clone. You don't want to become a clone of someone, because it stands out, doesn't it? You've got to do it your own way. It's got to be you, or it's almost like I'm not saying you're a forge, but do you know what I mean? It's. So that's how I've decided to do it. I'm going to go down my route. That is influenced by things, but not one particular. I'm not like God, I've got to draw like Mick McMahon, or I've got to draw like such and such. I take bits from them all, amalgamate them into the mess I make.
On something like Spectre, John is obviously riffing very hard on his noir influences and the all kind of gumshoe 1940s private detective stuff, but it's a sci-fi story. How did you approach that in balancing those two aspects?
Well, basically, when I saw, obviously I saw Carlos's work before John asked me to take over, and because there was only the 20 pages that Carlos had done, that's all the reference I had. I didn't have, I wouldn't even know where to ask, for Carlos's sketches or any reference he had written or drawn down. But from what I could see on Carlos's original 20 pages, as you say, it was very Dick Tracy, dare I say it, that kind of style. The cars, it's almost Dick Tracy stroke Judge Dredd, isn't it? Which is perfect. And so there were certain things I like the cars, for instance. They were clearly 1940s, 1950s, or even 30s cars that could hover. So that was easy enough to do. I think I used quite a lot of black in the story, because it's noir. I wanted it to look like that. But again, John's very open with this stuff. He doesn't dictate to you what he wants. He effectively just leaves you to it and hopes you come up with this good stuff. But like I say, because it was Spectre and because it was taking over Carlos. It'd be interesting to see if he had loads of designs down, because you looked at the couple of the characters of the costumes, Spectre himself, obviously, but apart from that, there wasn't, like I say, just 20 pages to use as reference for another 8 episodes, another 80 pages with characters that obviously John introduced as he went along. I don't know how many pages episodes John had written up until that point. But I think he had a 3rd episode ready. But apart from that, I don't know if he's John, when he was writing it, he kind of changed how he would have wrote it if it was for Carlos, and maybe changed it because I was doing it now. So that would be interesting to know. I've never asked him.
Because I mean, by the point that we started doing Spectre, you had quite a good working relationship with John. Tell us a little bit about that, and you know, what working on Rock of the Reds, which is the kind of sci-fi football series that John's been self-publishing. What you know, what you learned from that in terms of how John works and how you work together.
Well, he originally, and it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, 2014, he first contacted me through Facebook Messenger, asking if I'd be interested in doing this. At the point then, it was called Rom of the Reds. Obviously, Rom came out, Rom Space Knight came out, so we had to change the name. He asked, obviously I jumped at it. There was absolutely no way I was going to say no. Whether I could draw football or not, that wasn't the point. I was going to work with John Wagner. But when he first sent the first script, his script, I don't know if anyone else has said this, I'm sure they have, but his scripts are just the easiest to work from. He likes a lot of dialogue. I'll give him that. There's John likes dialogue in it, so you've got to fit that around the work. But he almost became a mentor. You know, teaching me. You know, he would explain how this would work or that would work, or making sure this is that. But it was a steep learning curve, because I'd only at that point only done a few small press stories. And I mean only a few. I think about 3 or 4, if that. So it was like, you know, plunged in the deep end with probably the most famous comic book writer in England, or Britain, should I say. But he trusted me, which is nice. And like I said, that's 10 years ago now, which is crazy. He plucked me out of the buses.
I mean, I wasn't going to mention that, but it's uniquely comics story, not necessarily rag to riches, but
not really, absolutely
but
not.
buses to the drawing board,
rags to better rags.
More stationary rags.
Yeah, exactly. But it was. I've got the message on my phone still, and it's a typical John kind of message. Which I thought at the time was I don't know, you know, when you think it's someone who's hacked into your account or something, because it just comes up on, I was driving the bus and it just came up on my phone. A message from John Wagner. And I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. And then, like I say, I was driving the bus and I got to a traffic lights, and I know you're not meant to, but my phone was in the binnacle, the speedometer where the speedo is, and it's just sitting there, and I just flipped it over, and I saw John Wagner's name there. I just opened it quickly, and all it said was, "Do you like football, and can you draw it?" That was it. Just to the point. As I say, so I just said yes, of course I can, and I love football and I can draw it, and I couldn't really. I've never tried it, to be honest. But as I said, I wasn't going to say no. But then I remember saying to him, "Oh, well, I'm a United fan, so I don't know if that puts you off," which he didn't, because he is,
right,
which is good. But yeah, but I do remember getting to my terminus on that journey and thinking to myself, this changes everything. And it did. And it did.
That kind of experience, I guess, is a learning one.
Mm.
Where were you at the beginning of that process in terms of your art, in terms of your style, in terms of the confidence in what you could do? And where were you after the first book of Rock of the Red?
When I look at it now, I saw John a couple of weeks ago, and it would never happen. But I said to him, "Oh, I'd love to draw that again," because but I think every artist, when any artist looks back on their work, you do it with a certain amount of cringe, and I certainly do. I remember looking at it, and I just thought to myself, I would do every single page differently. So like I said, it was such a learning curve because it is football, and you've got to make it look fun. And again, with football, I noticed that there was not much, unless you're going to get the shot with the stand in the background. But then that's a tough one as well, because you either have it's either grass and nothing, or it's a stand with 10,000 people in. There's no in between. So, but the figure drawing was a big one, obviously, for comics anyway. But especially in football, trying to get it to look dynamic and look natural. Again, I could do that much better now. But it was a learning curve, as you say. He saw my work before, so he could see what I could do, and he chose me to do it. I did the best I could. After I remember when the first book came out, I think actually when you look at it from issue 1 to issue 6, because they were separate issues, each issue it's progressively much better, and it's quite a steep improvement as well. Normally that could take years, but I suppose because it was 20 pages or 22 pages per book, and at that point, it was the most I'd sat down, or the longest I'd sat down to draw anything. Normally I'd do a pin-up for myself, not to be published anywhere, just a pin-up for myself. Even the small press work I did, that was only a handful of pages, which probably took me about 2 or 3 months, because it wasn't a paying gig. It was just something to do for fun. When it became professional, you had to do this for and we had deadlines. John gave me a deadline. I think it was, I don't know, a month or 2 months per book, and I had a full-time job. So dedicating yourself to that kind of 20 pages, I didn't think I'd improve that quickly, but I did. I don't know if that's because I'd never sat down and done 20 pages solidly in 2 months, never tested myself in that way. I don't know. It's a strange one, but I say even now I look back at it and it's still cringe, but it's what it is. It's I'm not gonna say over its time because it was only 10 years ago, but it's something I love as well. As much as it makes you cringe, I love it because it was my big break. It was out of the blue as well.
Wait, what's wonderful is that Rock of the Reds is going to be running in the Judge Dredd magazine from the beginning. I don't quite know when that's lined up to start, but I think possibly next year, because there's going to be a 3rd series.
There is,
yeah.
That's taken because so Rock of the Reds came out initially in 2016, and then we followed it up with Rock the God in 2020. But that was just going back to your last question, the transformation in my style and my ability jumps, I think, from Rock of the Reds to Rock the God, and that was only a space of 4 years, 3-4 years. But that was released just as we went into COVID and lockdown, and which was, I think, anyone in releasing books at that time, it was just trying to release books at that time, which was terrific because sales, obviously, because conventions were no longer a thing. Book signings in stores was no longer a thing. So we lost, I think, a huge amount, at least half the amount of sales we would have done otherwise. But yeah, so that kind of, for John especially, he lost money on that because this is all self-published, and I haven't got the kind of money to do this. I think we did that through the second one was through Kickstarter. The first one was entirely funded. So Rock the Reds was entirely funded by John. Rock the God was funded through Kickstarter, but because of the fees, postage, and countless other things that you have to do through Kickstarter, John lost money on that. So he's been stung twice, and he's obviously a glutton for punishment. I can't do this for a third time. And we were going down the Kickstarter route, and then we thought we were having talks with private investor to do it. It got complicated. John had an idea for the story, and he wanted to do it. He said it's one of the stories he wants to do. Because I think he's like semi-retired. Does what he wants, which is a great position to be. He just writes what he wants when he wants, which is perfect for him. But he had the story and he wanted to do it, and he spoke to Matt, and which he had done in the past, but things change. And Matt said, "Yeah, we'll take it. We'll have it in the Meg," which is we're both thrilled that it's going to be in the Meg. It needs to see a wider audience, which obviously it will do through the Meg. And I want to see how we progress again, with this character.
You've had some quite meaty projects. You've had Rock of the Reds, the Spectre, obviously, which we talked about, and you mentioned the Citadel there, which coming back to the start of our conversation. That's a fascinating project because that was a direct riff on the Apocalypse War, and there were moments where you were having to draw flashbacks and all sorts. And is there ever a sense when you get a pitch when John tells you what he wants to do, or you get the script to something, and you go, "Oh God," like. Carlos is always just there in the background.
Yeah. It's a challenge. Again, it's a challenge because you don't want people to think you're taking over from Carlos in any way, shape, or form. But when in this script, I think in my first work for 2000 AD, which was Warbuds. I can't remember what episode it was, the second or third episode. John said, I remember reading it and thinking, how am I going to do that? And it was, you've got to do your own take on the request denied page.
Yeah.
Really? and this. You just can't compete. You can't, I tried my best and I tried to make it different as much as I could. But again, I remember reading people's reviews of that story. Oh, Carlos did it better. Of course, Carlos did it better. It wasn't the thing. But it is, and the same in this, like I say, the same in the Citadel. But the thing is, John likes to go back to the Apocalypse War because it's a huge moment in Dredd's history, isn't it? The Apocalypse War. So it's the same as like when I was talking to him about we're doing a new Nightshade, and there's lots of other things he wants to do. And we're talking about World War II, and I remember saying to him, there must be so many untold stories of World War II. And I would assume that's exactly the same with the Apocalypse War, because it was the storyline is a world war, effectively, between the two, the the solves and the judges. So there must be so many stories that haven't been told of in the Apocalypse War that can be made up, obviously. And I think John just likes going back to them, and I don't blame him. It's fun to do. Not when they're you got to do your own interpretation of a Carlos page. I can imagine him doing another Judge Death story and go, "Oh, you got to do your interpretation of this really iconic Bond page." It's like, really, stop doing this to me. It's not fair.
Would you describe yourself as like a quick artist? When you're doing these pages, now because you've given up the buses, and so you're focusing on your art. When you get these meaty scripts from John, how quickly are you able to turn them around?
I got quick. To where I was doing what I think is quick. When you hear other artists talking about how much they do in a day, it annoys me. But I got down to doing a whole page penciled and inked in a day, which was pretty good. I've now gone back to probably a page every 2 days, and I don't know why that is. My wife tells me that it's because I'm putting too much detail in backgrounds. It's not necessary, but I think, and my friend actually said that. He goes, "Oh, you're the only artist I see who does all this detail." And I thought, we've not really looked at Chris Weston's art to start with. But when I was on the road recently, when I did Rogue a couple of months ago, I got that down to, again, a page a day. I'll work better to deadlines. I want Matt to give me, or Tharg. I want Tharg to give me deadlines. But he generally doesn't. Would you like to do this story, whether it's a John story or someone else's story? Well, what's the deadline? And when he doesn't give me a deadline, I don't know why that is. I've heard this from other artists as well. You don't seem to be 100% focused. You need that, I don't know, wolf at the door, if you like. On you. So and Matt, actually, funny enough, when I was on that Rogue, Matt said, "Oh, there's a Dredd someone wants you to do. Can you get the last 3 episodes of Rogue done in like 3 or 4 weeks?" And I was like, "Oh God." I just went, "Yeah, of course I can. No worries." And I did. The funny thing is I did, because like I said, when he put that deadline there, I worked quicker. There's no deadline. I don't know why. I just slow down. It's like it's not as if it's not needed, so you don't have to rush it. Where you should really, you should rush every page. You want to be reliable and quick, and then you get more money.
I mean, it's I call it the Daisy Steiner principle from Spaced, which is the line where Simon Pegg says, "Perhaps poverty will inspire you."
Absolutely. I remember one year I was doing my tax return, and I hit below the threshold to pay tax, and I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting there. How did we survive? What were we eating? Because this is and it was, I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. 14,000 or something, whatever it was. I can't remember. But I remember going, "Oh my!" I was quite shocked because I ran downstairs and told my wife that the taxman's giving us money, which is a first. This has changed since then. I don't know what was so. I think it was one of those years when you move and everything just slows down. Mortgage, talking to solicitors, but I have tried to speed up. Like I said, I've got this office, this studio, so I used to work from home, and it worked well for a few years, but spending all your life working out of home, and I'm quite a late bloomer, if you like, to drawing comics. So he spent 25, 30 years working out of home, then to work from home, it was a novelty for the first 3 or 4 years. But then I think as everyone realised through COVID and lockdown, it is a nice novelty, and then it gets boring, and then you miss your colleagues, and then you need to get out because your home and your work life all merges into one mess. So I said to my wife, this was last year. I said, it's not working out as well as I wanted it to.
Mm.
My work's slowing down. It's not getting any worse. It's just slowing down. It's hard to get motivated. And I watched a video on this one comic artist who said he rented a studio. So I started looking at cheap office space. Or Chris Weston asked, because he lives down the road. He lives down the road in Eastbourne. And Chris Weston said, "Oh, you can come down to share some studio space with him." But I'm one of those artists who likes private space. You know, I used to draw like that where no one could see. And I think it's got about 3 or 4 people in this studio, and there's far too many people. So I rented this place out, and I have sped up since then. And as you say, you know, I need to earn the money. So being a quick comic artist is a good thing. Whether you're good at it, as long as you're quick.
Well, that's the Venn diagram, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good, quick, and cheap.
Yeah.
You can choose two of those.
I'm at least 2 of them.
From everything that you've said, is it that you need structure? You know, you need a space where that you can leave. You need a space. You need a deadline. You need to be able to know that there's a routine, and you know,
I think it's
per project.
Well, I'm sure are you still working from home, or do you go into the office now?
No, I still work from this room as I've
done
for 4 years now.
Do you like that?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. Well, because all of my work is online.
Okay.
You know, and you know, my communication with my colleagues, email, doing stuff like this. Like I wouldn't, not to get too far into it, but I wouldn't be able to do this podcast in the office.
Yeah.
You know,
but I suppose yours is that your situation is different because you do have deadlines
every day. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that gives you the impetus to do it. You know, get on it. When and as I said, I worked for many in different industries. With people effectively relying on you to do, you know, to turn up, to get it done, and whatnot, whatever job that may have been, and obviously going into a certain time, all of those things that involve, you know, going out to work. And as I said, when the first few years of working from home, it was, like I say, totally unique, you know, and interesting and fun. But then it's almost like the walls were starting to close in. It all just got a bit, everything just got murky, and everything, I couldn't turn off. Even though I was slowing down, I couldn't switch off. So I would have, you know, of an evening, I'd be sitting there, even if I had no deadlines, I'd be sitting there going, I should be upstairs. I should be working. Come the weekends, I should be working. Your brain's just in that, you should be working. You're not doing your job. And when I got this place, when you leave home to go to work, your brain goes into work mode. It's a fascinating thing. You walk down the road and your brain, you think, oh, what? How am I going to tackle this page? How am I going to do this? When you're at home, I'm not saying you, but when you're at home, that isn't what happens. There's too many distractions. There's too many. It sounds awful to say, but there's too many other things you'd rather be doing. You know, oh look, there's FIFA football sitting there. I could play FIFA. I could play Call of Duty. I could watch a DVD. I could, you know, all these things that you shouldn't be doing, but they're distractions. Everyone say, whereas here, you come in here, it's just work. There's no distractions. There's no, you know, even to the point where I know a lot of artists have background movies on or documentaries in the background. I've stopped that. I think, as far as I go, I don't even have podcasts, because if I'm, I used to. Actually, no, that's a lie. That's a lie. If I'm inking, because all the hard work's been done, inking, you know, the laying out.
Yeah.
Inking, I can have podcasts on, but generally it's just music. But
I'm the same in that regard. I can't have a TV or when I'm writing, whereas when I'm designing stuff like the newsletters and things, I have a podcast on,
Yeah.
because then it's just, I'm just doing that. I've got an old hacker 1970s hacker radio in the corner that I've had
Oh, have you?
restored, and I have that on like the lowest volume setting on like Radio 4, so I can hear voices, but I can't tell what they're saying.
Yeah. I
And
see.
that's enough to break the silence without distracting me, which is quite nice.
Well, I listen to all manner of weird stuff when I'm, I can't believe I listen to Scala radio, which is, I don't know, radio for the over 60s or something. It's because it's very easy listening, and you're not really paying any attention because they don't say anything of any interest. So
I'm sure they'll be delighted by that review. 5 stars.
Yeah, but so you're not losing your concentration. It's not. They're not saying anything interesting. The music's okay. It's classical music. It's quite easy listening music to a degree. I don't need it to distract me, but I do need some noise in the background. Film scores are good like that as well. Film scores, because a film score, you're not meant to notice the music. It's meant to enhance the mood of the film. You're not meant to really hear the music as a thing, and that's exactly what I've tried to have in here. Unless I'm inking, like I said, then I'll have podcasts and listen to you or whoever.
Well, I mean, just talk about your process for a minute, because you're talking about penciling and inking. You still work traditionally in that respect. Is it a case of you take it to the inking stage and then it's onto the computer, or do you have other layers to that as well?
I have since, and I'm speaking in the last week, changed my method.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was purely out of it's people who follow me on social media would know I had many issues with inks and pens.
Okay.
They will know. So the pens I was getting because of Brexit was no longer, well, they were still available, but the postage made them not really cost effective. And then you change that and you go to a different thing, and everything I kept doing that no longer was available. The ink was no longer available, this, that, and the other. So anyway, I got to a point where I just thought, so the inking part of the work, I'd ink the page after penciling, but then when I used to try to erase the pencils, it would grey out the inks. It would take a portion of the inks off, and then you'd have to go over sections of it again to re-ink it. And I thought, well, this isn't working. So in the last 2 weeks, week 2 weeks, I've decided to pencil on the computer, digitally pencil. Then I can't show you any of it because it'll be all spoilers. Then I print out that page and then I ink that page on Bristol through a light box. So there's no erasing on that page. And I've come to the conclusion that penciling on the computer is good because you can get you can faff about with it, if you know what I mean. You can move things around to make the page look better. You can change things much more easier than you can if it's a pencil page, because you're quite reluctant. I don't know why you're quite reluctant to rub out something you spent 2 or 3 hours on. If it's not working, you'll just go with it because you go, I'm not drawing all that again. Whereas on the computer, you can spin things around, you can move them around and make them work that way. Whereas, like I say, on a bit of pencil on paper, you can't do that. You just have to erase it all and then start again. So yeah, I'm penciling on the computer, printing it out A3, and then inking through a light box, and then I scan it all back into the computer. And then sometimes I add some textures to it, some splatters. I digitally add them to it if I've forgotten to do it traditionally. And then I send them off to Matt. I don't get to colour most of my work. I've only done a few covers. Most of the time it's sent off to someone else to colour, which is always interesting.
I mean, that can be a double-edged sword. It saves you time. You can concentrate on the pencil and inking, but then you have no control over that process.
It's very interesting because I could do a page. Let's say it's Dredd. I could do a page of Dredd, and in my head, I see the colours.
Yeah.
What it would the atmosphere I'm trying to put across, and in my head, and I almost like they have colour cards in movies, don't they, for the scene setting and all of that, and I have that in my head. Even though I'm doing it in black and white, I go, oh, I can imagine this would be, like it's an underwater scene, like in a submarine. You can imagine the insides of a submarine be all lit up red or something, and that's how I see things when I'm drawing them. And that's it. Obviously, I can't tell a colorist to do that because that's not their job to do. Well, no, you can't do that. That's not fair to the colorist. So when the colors come through, it's not bad. It's just different. I look at it and go, oh, that's not how I would have done it. Not because they've done it wrong. It's always interesting to see it. I remember when Matt said Dylan Teague was coloring my work for the first time. God, was that on the Citadel? I think it might have been. I wasn't sure his colors would work with my work because his work colors on intricate work like a Cliff Robinson's works a tree and quite pastel tones. And I thought that's not going to work on my artwork. But who am I to tell Matt or anyone else? I don't think that's going to work. And then when the pages came out, I see it when everyone else sees it when it's in the prog and it turns up, or I get them for the post. And I thought, wow, it worked amazing, absolutely amazing. I've not had a disappointing moment so far, which is, and every colorist I've had colour my work are all totally different. I don't know if that means my artwork is bland.
What a conclusion to draw.
I don't know. Well, normally certain people's colours wouldn't work on certain people's artwork, but people's colours seem to work on my art. There's not one I've gone, oh, that didn't work. They've all worked. And I was like, what does that say about my work? Is it, I don't know, conservative or something? I don't know.
Well, I mean, ultimately, that's the value of a good colorist.
Yeah,
and we have 2000 AD, and this isn't corporate speak. We have good colorists. Chris Blythe, Dylan Teague, Len O'Grady, Julie. I've forgotten her name, and she's going to never forgive me for that. She just did the R.M. Guerra.
Oh yeah.
I'm so sorry, Julia, if you're listening to this. Awful. But yeah, we have some very good colorists. But what I find interesting is that in 2000 AD history, having separate colorists is a relative rarity. Most artists over the years have if it's in color, they've colored their own work. Whereas in American comics, that's just the process.
Yeah.
You chop it up into a conveyor belt of
they even
economics.
They even have separate inkers, don't they? In American. I was actually going to ask Matt if because I would color my things like I did a recent Dredd cover for Prop 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it was.
You're just making that number up, surely.
Yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5. Think so. But and I coloured it, and then I have quite low saturation on it, and I loved how it came out, and I thought it's almost like I say, well, no, it's not pastel because that's Dylan pastel tones. It's just a desaturated colour, and then if I was like I said, I was going to ask Matt if I can. Could he? Two things I was going to ask Matt. One was, can I colour my own pages once, just on like a 6-pager?
Yeah.
Just so I can see how I would do it, because I haven't done that. And the other one was if I would be able, if he's got a spare script hanging about that is in no rush for any deadline. Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5. We like that one so much. You put it on a T-shirt.
We did. That's cool. So I was going to ask him if I could also paint one.
Right. Okay.
do a fully painted one. That's something, you know, that's just going back to the 90s when I was reading and always wanted to do one. I'd like to have a go at it. But yeah, I'm going to ask Matt if there's just a couple of scripts that hang around that no deadlines on, and he can just leave them with me, and I can just, you know, just do them other than my main work. But yeah, like you mentioned Chris Blythe, he's doing the road covers. And I'm looking forward to seeing that, because I think he's only coloured my work once, and that was when I had to take over from Colin McNeil on oh god, what was it? It was, well, have I got Babes in Arms? That was Greg Staples.
That was a very long time ago.
Yeah. Can't remember what story it was now. But I like to take over from Colin McNeil. So Chris Blythe had obviously started the colours on Colin's work. So he and like I say, I don't know if colorists match their colours or change their colours for different artists, but the colours he had done for Colin's work, he just carried on through mine. And that was, I don't know how many years ago that was. That was 5 years ago. So I haven't seen him colouring my work since then. What was that story? That's annoying me. That is.
Was it the
Victims of Bennett Binney?
Oh yes, yeah.
That one, yeah. That's about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's going to be So it's going to be interesting to see his colours on Rogue, because I don't think he's coloured Rogue before, has he?
Not to my knowledge, but
no.
Who knows? One of the things I was going to ask about was, you know, reading interviews that you've done before. There is what I think is a unique phenomenon for 2000 AD with its creators, and particularly third, fourth, fifth generation creators, where all they want to do in comics, their ambition in comics is to draw for 2000 AD. And then those that have kind of stick with it. Don't necessarily kind of branch out far and wide into into other comics. And looking at your, I mean, you were pitching stuff in the 90s. Was that the Dave Bishop era, or slightly later with Andy?
I think it was probably Dave Bishop. I think that's the time when I sent my portfolio in, and it returned with not much advice back then. Effectively saying, no, you're not good enough. What do you think you're doing? But I just remember my mum seeing this letter and being furious. I'm going to phone them up. I thought, you cannot phone them up, because that'll be the end of any dream of working with them.
That's the most mum reaction to any rejection letter I've ever heard. Amazing.
Yeah. She was like, I'm going to phone them up. I goes, no. I took the letter off her before she memorized the phone number. But yeah, that was. I think I did it a couple of times in the 90s. And looking back now, I've even got the portfolio, because stupidly I went to a printer's and got it all printed up, professionally printed up. And they said, how many copies do you want? And because it's professional printers, I said, I only want 4 or 5. And obviously doing that kind of amount is not cost effective. And was I on a dole then? I can't remember. I think I must have blown my entire dole check on it. And I was sure I was going to get the yes, you're good enough. But now, like I said, looking back on it now, I look at these pages and I think, oh my life, what was I thinking? Why did I waste that dole check? Why was there no one there telling me not to do this? But yeah, this is, for me, this is all I ever wanted to do, was 2000 AD. It was, I remember being in a job that there's nothing wrong with this job. I've always had it in me since every job I've had, that I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. This is not what I'm here to do. I remember this one job I had. It was in one of a number of bakeries I worked in. I walked out, having a bad day. Or did I walk out, or did I not even walk in? I think I probably just didn't even walk in. But I remember, because we used to live we live in the south coast, and I walked along Brighton seafront, and I went onto the pier. And I remember sitting in the pier and having a pint with this, those sit on musical cars that kids, Postman Pat Van or something along them lines, just next to me. And I sat with this thing playing its music, because my brain was just so focused on what am I doing with my life, with this, I don't know, Postman Pat thing going on for about 3 hours. And I was like, right, I've made up my mind. I've got to become a comic artist. I remember walking off, and I walked past, was it Forbidden Planet in Brighton? Or was it the Fantastic? But I think it's a Forbidden Planet. And in the window was the ABC Warriors graphic novel that came out. This is, like I say, back in the 94, 93, 94. This ABC Warriors graphic novel with Kev Walker's art in it. And I just remember looking at it and going, oh, this is what I want to do. This is all that I want to do. I don't want to do anything. I want to work for 2000 AD. And it took 20, 30 years later for it to happen. But it happened eventually. We got there. Never give up. That's it.
What an epiphany to have on Brighton Pier.
Yeah. I'm trying to, I can probably remember, I'll probably dream about that bloody music. Like I say, I was sitting there for about 3 or 4 hours just drinking beers, thinking, what am I doing with my life with this music going on and on and on. But it's because, like I said, every job I've had, I've always been, I shouldn't be doing this. This isn't what I'm here for. I shouldn't be doing this. It's not what I was put on this planet to do. I was put on this planet to draw, and I'm going to make it happen. And it did, like I say, 30 or 40 years later.
But it's one of those things that you've kind of gone from 0 to 60. I mean, within seconds, kind of thing. Working with John, but then John bringing you onto Dredd, and becoming one of the kind of in rotation artists on Dredd. Is this a position that you're just happy to stay in, or do you have ambitions outside of Dredd and 2000 AD and other things, or have you just not had? I mean, you've been in pretty constant work for the past few years.
I've not sought other or seeked out other work. I'm more than happy to do what I'm doing. Never say never, because you just don't know what happens. And I've always, the thing that the problem 2000 AD has, it hasn't got American money. That's just the fact. It just can't do that. And my dream, I am living my dream. I'm doing, Judge Dredd or any other characters, Road Trooper. This is the dream. This is what I want to do. But I can't deny that if an email was to come along saying we're going to give you £400 a page to do something, money does talk. It talks to us all. And but I would never just. I've never sought it. I've never gone looking for it. And I'm doing what I want to do. But as I say, the only way it's going to convince me otherwise is, like I say, money talks. Money does talk, and we've all got bills to pay. I think there's only one, maybe two characters I've always wanted to draw, and everyone wants to draw Batman at some point. Maybe that's another judgment on Gotham. Who knows? I'd have a word with John. But I've never sought anything else other than 2000 AD. It's like when I have bad days, when things aren't working, and if I'm not working on Judge Dredd, if I'm having a bad day, like if I was having a bad day on Spectre or Rogue or whatever I'm having a bad day on, the way I kind of, if you've got like a creative hump, the way I get over it is to start sketching Dredd, because it's like this go-to in my head of getting things going again. It's my fallback guy, if you like. Go back to Dredd. So that's how deep 2000 AD and everything is imprinted in my head. That's my, and if I was doing Batman, if I was doing any other character, that would still be my fallback to get myself back into the game, if you like. But like I said, I never say never, because you never know. You know, 6 years ago I was driving a bus around Patcham. Now I've got my own studio, and I'm drawing Judge Dredd or Rogue Trooper or Spectre or Rock or whatever. So you just never know what's around the corner.
I mean, there's we won't go into the details because there's still announcements to be made, but you've got some exciting projects coming up in the relative near future, which are very exciting. I guess it's that kind of final question of, you know, looking back on the last 10, 20 odd years. That epiphany sat on Brighton Pier watching Postman Pat just go over and over and over again. Was that the nudge? Was that the enough to keep you going? You know, has there been other times since then when you've gone, really?
I think you do need those moments, yeah. Sometimes bad moments bring out the best in you, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, and that's how it kind of worked. So one of the jobs I had, the bus driving job, was a hate-filled job. Everyone says bus drivers are miserable bastards, and they are generally miserable bastards because the job makes them that way. So, you know, before I became a bus driver, I was a happy-go-lucky, well, to a degree, kind of bloke. And but becoming a bus driver, I've recently had tests on my blood pressure, which is sky high, and this, that, and the other. That's nothing to do with comic art. That's to do with that's years. That's 10, 13 years of bus driving. That's done that. But that was another, like I said, another impetus for me to do this. It took longer than I wanted it to.
Yeah.
But sitting in the bus, stuck in traffic, going round in circles, doing the same stuff day in, day out. Yeah, again, convinced me that I've got to do this. I've got to work my arse off to get to where I want to be. You know, and it was fortuitous that John did what John did. And I owe him immensely for that. But I was determined it would happen one way or the other. It just happened in that kind of fairy tale way, rather than me submitting it or go into the thought bubble contest or all these other ways of doing it. But you do need those moments. You do need to be something like Bob Ross. You know, you got to have your dark to have your light, and all of that. Yeah. You do, because it's again, it's the same of me getting the office, the studio. I wasn't having a good time at home, not home life. Sorry, darling. It was the work and home life wasn't working. It wasn't working, and I was getting you do get quite dark and quite moody and quite depressed over it, because you're thinking, I'm living the dream here. I'm doing comic art for a living. Why is it not working? Why can't I get this to work? And it's because of the situation. It wasn't nothing to do with necessarily the work. It was just things combined. And again, it turns out the bad situation turned out a positive, because I went, right, okay, this is what we've got to do. And I did this, and I got the studio, and that's worked out wonders, because I think my work's improved, my flow's improved, my the turning the pages out quicker. So again, like I say, you and having a plan, like I say, have a plan as well. You've got to make a plan. Say, whether it's a 4-year plan, 5-year plan, making a plan is a thing. I want to be able to write my own story one day. I can't write to save my life. It's not going to stop me. I actually sent John a story idea yesterday, and it's just one of those bits you just tag onto the bottom of an email. So there's also email with back talking about this, that, and the other, and then I just, oh, by the way, I had this idea, blah blah blah. What do you think? And every time I've done that, it's just come back going, yeah, great. You keep that. But he actually came back and goes, that's a really good idea. He goes, remind me of that, because he's doing Nightshade. He goes, remind me of that in a month or so. And I was like, wow, I've come up with a good idea. I'm not going to say what it is, because some other writer, Rob Williams, will nick it or something. So.
He's terrible for that. Never tell him anything.
Yeah. Where did that small house come from? I wonder.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
My pleasure, man.
Fascinating chat. And looking forward to seeing Spectre all collected, and Rock appear in the magazine, and as yet unannounced future endeavors. So yeah, plenty more.
Rogue next week.
Rogue next week. Yeah. Wonderful.
Which I'm looking forward to seeing. Like I say, I'm looking forward to seeing Chris's colours on my work. It's really intriguing.
Fantastic. Great stuff. And thank you to Dan for such a fascinating little chat. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for more from the Galaxy's Greatest Podcast. Got some really juicy episodes coming up in the near future. Like I said, make sure you're signed up to the 2000 AD Thrill Mail. And we shall see you in 2 weeks' time. So until then, Earthlets, please do take care of yourselves. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Give us a like and give us a share online. And until next time, Splendid Verthrig.